Hey, X here. Let's talk about success for a minute. The keys to success are integrity, always learning. Hello, everybody. This is Peter Exodus Okoffer, and welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of Level Up, the Personal Branding Podcast. It's been a learning experience. I've learned a lot myself, and I've really enjoyed this experience. So I'm going to start off leaving my Virgo mode, which I think most people probably prefer, jumping back into my Gemini mode here for before we get into the topic of the day, which is branding gone wrong. But going to circle back to the last episode, the Roaring Twenties, for a minute, and just talk about a few other things. First is an aspect of my brand that I've touched on, but don't really put in my art much, but it still comes out, and that is my my service in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, and I served 6 years. From 84 to 90, joined 3 days out of boot camp, off of high school graduation, went straight to boot camp. To be honest with you, I regretted it immediately. I joined because I thought joining the Marine Corps would turn me into a man. I was 18, pretty immature, not all that confident in myself. So that's why I joined, and I did not really wish I hadn't for a long time. And one of the lessons I learned from that experience was I could have turned around early on and said, this isn't for me, but I didn't want to be perceived as a quitter. So, it was one of these instances that, there's a time to continue and there's a time to take a better path. And so, I learned from that, it's a mixed blessing, because I learned from that, do not let other people's opinions of your decisions influence those decisions too much. But as I've experienced life and moved on, I have grown to appreciate my time in the military. Not too many people get the honor of serving. And as I said, it was a mixed blessing, but as I matured, I really have, I'm glad I did it now. Certainly serving in politics and seeing numerous wars fought, and how elected officials, some of them are very quick to, let's go to war, even though they've never served, and they don't have that perspective. And then certainly with the Gulf War, the second Gulf War under President George W. Bush, and some of the things that happened there, with some of the prisoners there in Iraq, and I was able to cut through a lot of the garbage and the gaslighting there to see what was really going on there, since I had served. There are certain things, a lot of accusations being thrown back and forth. But if you served, you knew, really who was telling the truth and whatnot. So, here as we sit in 2022 with the world as crazy as it is, I do have a lens that I can look through serving in the military, because there's so much gaslighting and, both sides, but one side more than other. than the other doing a lot of the gaslighting, but it's good. It's nice to be able to see through all that, because I have my own personal experience to look through. The other thing that I find valuable from my experience in the Marine Corps is, these recorded instances of abuse and outright murder in some places of people of color by the police. So I have an interesting take on all that, a complicated take in some ways on all that because of my military experience. And, essentially I remember reading an essay from a former Baltimore police officer who also served in the military, and so he's had on both hats, and essentially says a lot of this is due to just poor training, and you get a much better training in the military, and it kind of hits home because here I am doing this last episode. About a week after the shooting in Texas there, and I think it's Uvalde with all the kids that got shot, and the police officer is waiting out about 45 minutes before going into the room. Unfortunate call, and I read somewhere where the police chief had a training. Active shooter training in December, and so my question is, what kind of training was that? Was it was it actually participatory in going through an actual simulation, walking through it, or was this a PowerPoint presentation? Because in the military you don't do PowerPoint presentations. You actually walk it and live it, and to the best of the ability of the whoever's training you, to try to make it as realistic as possible. So interesting journey for me in my perspective over the years with my time in the military. I do value it now. When I was younger, I was pretty conflicted, as you can probably see. But that's part of my journey. I think most people probably have other instances like that where, you're kind of like, why am I doing this when it happened? But later on down the road, you really understand that sometimes it takes years. But, higher power, God, whatever term you use, puts you in situations for a reason. The second instance of my journey I like to revisit and add some more, substance or depth to is my writings. I talked about going to street lit and then kind of hit a wall with that, and then hey, what did I love when I was a kid? And I did say Star Wars and Marvel Comics. Well, the other factor that I didn't forgot to really mention, but was big in my decision to go in that direction was there weren't any black superheroes really. The whole superhero blockbuster cinema was blowing up, and at the time, Luke Cage, in Black, that was before Luke Cage and Black Panther, and at the time, this is the mid 2000s, 2007, 8, 6, 9, those years. A lot of the black characters didn't even have regular comic lines. So I wanted to, and I wasn't the only one doing this. There were a lot of black creators online, doing their own black superheroes. So that was my other kind of impetus to get back into science fiction and fantasy, and also black women of color. They just canceled Batwoman on the CW, but we did have a black LGBTQ Batwoman for a while, so that's cool. But that was the other reason for going in and and uh, you know, taking my writing into science fiction and fantasy, because I just felt like uh, people that look like me should be represented, and it wasn't just African American or African characters. I put Asian and Latino characters in as well, and I even Native American. I do have Muslim characters in my Centralic series, just because everybody should be represented, and it's interesting because go to writers' conferences and particularly white writers sometimes struggle, with writing black characters and how can I really do justice to a black character when I'm white. And I always would tell them from the audience, because I've never been on the dais and been part of the writers up there, but just write. Don't worry about it. We're people of color are happy that they're on the pages, and leave it to the writers of color to really dig down and really get the cultural specifics of the characters, because there's plenty of like myself, weird African American kid who loves the Beatles and Kiss and Led Zeppelin and the Doors and whatnot. So we're happy to be represented, and you don't have to be get everything right. So yeah, that's my take on that, and I just wanted to mention that because that comes out of my activism. That's part of my journey, and I think that's a key pivot point as an artist that I missed as far as the other reason of why I went into a science fiction fantasy. So, branding gone bad. I'm going to give a few instances of recent artists, sports figures, celebrities who kind of got sidetracked and things went sideways for them because their brand and who they were a little off. And I'm going to start with Tiger Woods. We know about the golf club incident and all that, breaking, his wife at the time breaking the windows out, and it led to a divorce. But, for those not old enough to remember, Tiger's made a lot of money. I can't remember the car company, but having little kids saying I'm Tiger Woods. So Tiger basically put himself up there as a role model for little kids, and ran these ads for years and made a lot of money running these ads. And it looks like he was running around with 8 or 9 different women on his wife. He made that. He went along with that branding. He didn't have to do that. Charles Barkley, Chuck, he in the 90s, he ran the ad talking about I'm not your role model. It was controversial at the time, but Chuck knew himself. Chuck has always said controversial stuff. He was, a Rush Limbaugh supporter back there. He's actually kind of mellowed out over the years, but Chuck still offers his opinions when he just Uvalde and George Floyd, and he offers his opinion, and sometimes over the years sometimes Chuck's opinions have not been politically correct, and of course what's politically correct changes. But Chuck knew that was part of his personality, and so he got out in front of it, and he said, I'm not a role model. Another one who, who was similar to Tiger Woods in some ways, but didn't fall into the trap of Tiger Woods is Peyton Manning. I've been in Indiana and lived in Indianapolis most of his career, and he's put up there as a Boy Scout, but he never said explicitly said I am a role model, I want to be a role model. And if you look at him closely, when they sat down for the in-depth interviews with Peyton Manning, Peyton would say, "Hey, I've made mistakes. I am, I kind of laugh sometimes at the squeaky clean image that these television commercials have given me." And he had a situation, I think, with a female trainer or a female reporter. I can't remember all of the details back in college at University of Tennessee. And when that did come out, I mean, Peyton apologized and dealt with it well. But it worked because, Peyton would strategically remind people that, hey, I can be an idiot just like everybody else. The second instance is Ellen DeGeneres. I personally like Ellen. I don't think she's a bad person. But Ellen, over the years, put herself out there as the queen of nice. And again, I like her as an interview, but the problem was it came out that the people running the show, in leadership are not treating the staffers very well. And she did take ownership and said, "This happened on my watch. I apologize. I'll do better, and we'll fix this." But it was a pretty big blow that she did not really recover from. I mean, she just had her last show, I think, in the last couple days. So her brand and that did, the whole thing going on with her employees did not sync up with her brand. And she just, it still hangs over her, unfortunately. And again, I think she's a good person, but you have to surround yourself with good people, and you have to be aware of what's going on around you and how that affects your brand. And, when you have a big brand like Ellen DeGeneres, when you bring people on, you give them responsibility, you have to trust them, because they're when you give them responsibility for your show, you're also giving them responsibility in some ways for your brand. And she forgot that. But I wish her the best. I do like her, but that's a mistake, and this is all about learning. And finally, I have to just revisit Michael Jackson again. It's unfortunate. He's so talented. Back in the Embrace Your Weird, I said, I alluded to the fact that, the sparkle socks and the gloves and, the red jacket from, I think, Beat It. And, then you marry that with the Elephant Man's Bones and Bubbles the Chimp. And this whole notion of there is no such thing as bad publicity, that old Barnum and Bailey saying. Well, unfortunately for Michael, he got too weird and doubled down on the weird. And there's evidence that Michael knew that this was happening and that he promoted it, and he wanted to be out there, between his albums. And it's unfortunate because Michael was big enough, his music was so good. Because, his music, look at the streaming on Spotify. His music, despite all the scandal and the mistakes, he and others made in his branding, the music, won't die. And, I told you, I'm going to sit down and we'll talk next season about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Who and branding. But, the Who and the Rolling Stones, branded off of the Beatles. The Beatles were they didn't really have a brand outside of their music because they didn't need one. Led Zeppelin's the same way. You hear the stories about their partying and the groupies and all that. And then Pink Floyd. But they were good enough where they didn't, need all that branding. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Great band of the 70s, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Chicago. Just good music, didn't need branding. And in some ways for Michael, the all that other stuff, overshadowed the music in some aspects. And Michael got so weird at times that people, were like, well, yeah, this dude is really weird. I wouldn't, do this with kids, but all this other weird stuff happened. Maybe he is like that, and so it's hard to to pick through the truth. With Michael, I mean, he was acquitted. He was charged once, no charges were brought. Then he was charged again. There was a trial, and he was acquitted. But who knows the truth there? As I said, I have not watched Finding Neverland. Maybe at some point I will, and I don't want to disrespect, because if there is something there, I don't want to disrespect that, but I'll just say, right now I have to remain neutral on that because, there's a lot to pick through there. And Michael didn't do himself any favors with, all the weirdness he tried to put out there in the name, to get attention. And this goes back to the episode of being notorious. I mean, when you're as good as Michael Jackson is, you don't have to be notorious. Your art and your music speaks for itself. And then closer to home, Will Smith's slap of Chris Rock at the Oscars. Obviously, not a good moment. Respect both men as artists. It was painful to watch. And, Chris Rock is doing well. He's handling it with class from what I can see. I can't blame his brother and his mother, though, for being upset. But, Chris Rock has always been a class act. And I feel bad he was put in that position. But I also feel bad for, Will Smith because he's very talented as well. The one thing Will has going for him is this, there's not a pattern of this. I mean, I saw a clip somewhere where he was on, the red carpet and some guy, tried to kiss him and, he just kind of, moved his head back and cracked a little joke and walked on. So this isn't a pattern. That's the good thing as far as, Will Smith's brand. But this was totally out of character with Will Smith's brand. That's why it was so like, what the hell just happened? I mean, everybody, that's why it was such a big story because, this isn't Will Smith. This isn't the Will Smith we've seen. But, ultimately, I hope they do sit down and talk. They will. I do think Will is been contrite. Unfortunately, he hasn't, sat down in front of the camera. At some point, he has to do that, and he will, and I think he'll do a good job with it. But, the one strong thing is that, Will has a strong brand because although many of us are disappointed in him, it's not a pattern, and talked about this before. I mean, a lot of stuff happened in the world. Who knows what he's dealing with in his personal life and things. So we're all having bad days now. Yeah, everybody does. But Will did build that strong brand. At some point, he'll come back. In some ways, it might be liberating, as an artist for him, because he doesn't have to, chase the blockbuster stuff anymore. Maybe, if he doesn't get that, and sometimes that is liberating. But will he ever come back? I don't know. I mean, Wanda Sykes and Amy Schumer both talked about how traumatizing watching that was for them, and and for some people they won't be able to forget that, and that's their right, and I mean, stuff happens for a reason, and it's unfortunate for Will, but I think at some point he will make his way back. I think essentially he's a good person, and just going back to his whole brand and being a good guy, I do think he's a good guy. It would have been interesting if one of the bad boys of Hollywood that happened and how everything would have played out. And I'm not going to name any names. I have a couple in mind, but you know who the bad boy actors in Hollywood are, and take let's do same race, and how that would have played out. I think it was unique, and Will had a brand, and it was jolting to see, someone who had this brand and this happened to them. But I do still think that's a pretty authentic brand that he built, because again, this is an aberration. It's a bad aberration, but I do still think it's a pretty strong brand, and if he plays his cards right, he'll be able to survive this. So what do you do when things go sideways and you do things that are not in line with your brand? Well, admit you're wrong and own it. And as you work your way through the mistakes, share what you've learned from it. The poster child for this, to me, is Kanye West, or Ye now. He's wrecked a lot of, totaled a lot of cars when it comes to branding. But he always comes back and apologizes, and he talks about what he's learned. And he survives. He survived as an artist. Part of it is because he wants to be so good. And, when you dive in deep and look at Kanye, I mean, yes, there's this big ego there, but, truly underneath all that, he really is, trying to find good and trying to do God's work. But yeah, he has his cringeworthy moments, and we're still in the middle of his divorce, and at least he's not been on Instagram lately. But he makes mistakes like nobody else. But he also owns those mistakes, and when he's ready, he comes and works through those mistakes with us. So he takes us on that journey. Another great one at using his mistakes as a teaching process is Richard Pryor. I don't know. I think I might have a season 2 episode totally on Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor, boy, you talk about mistakes. I mean, he beat women and drugs and everything else, and then he would go up and crack jokes about it. I mean, he lit himself on fire, tried to commit suicide, and put it into his comedy act. And remember back in the Chappelle Show, they had they used to have an episode when keeping it real goes wrong, and people like to talk about keeping it real, but for me, the king of keeping it real was Richard Pryor, because he was not afraid. Part of his brand and the appeal of his brand was to shine a light on his weaknesses and his failings, and to take us into there and walk with us as he dealt with all that stuff. Johnny Cash, was another one who, kind of, he even said, kind of angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other at times. And you listen to his music, and particularly, that stuff in the 2000s, his American Masters albums, and boy, he's raw on that, and just dealing with loss and looking back. But these three kind of point the direction in how you deal with when you have a strong brand, bad stuff's going to happen. The best thing to do it is to own it, and and communicate with the people around you that are affected by it, and try to be a better person, and involve them in the process. So after going through to do some editing on past episodes, I have a few corrections to make. So going back to my instruments used in the late 80s, early 90s, I said I had a Roland Alpha Juno 1. I actually had a Roland Alpha Juno 2, which had an extra octave on the keyboard and was touch sensitive aftertouch for the keys. I also said my first book What Burns Below came out in 2016. That actually came out in 2015. And so, yeah, those are small. I just wanted to make. Oh, there's another one here. So I said in one of the episodes, I talked about the Kmart red light special. That was the blue light special. And for those of you who don't even remember Kmart or do, but don't remember the blue light specials, they had a blue light in the store that you could, they would turn on when they had a sale. And they got rid of those probably well before Kmart basically closed. But so wanted to do those corrections. I also, on my website www.peterokauffer.com, I do have a list of the articles on branding. If you want to take a deeper dive in that, this is the kind of the stuff that forms kind of the background to what I do with a podcast. And also want to mention, as far as the Facebook memes that I use, these are not my original thoughts. I did not write these. I just want to make that clear. If a author is giving with the meme, then I will give the author credit. It's kind of a tricky situation. I mean, this podcast is not a scholarly book, so I'm not as uncomfortable just giving the memes, but just want to make sure that you know that I didn't. Those aren't my thoughts. I think these are very good quotes, and I think it's important. They fit the podcast, and it's important to have them in this podcast. So that's why I use them. But as I said, this season and in future seasons, when the author is given, I will give the author credit. But I do think it's important to use them regardless. And again, this is not a scholarly book, so it can be a little looser with, attributing stuff to people, just as long as I'm not taking, false credit for something. Wow, so this episode went longer than I thought. So I'm going to go rogue, and I'm not going to end with a song. I was thinking about this. I really don't have a song that really fits into this, which is fine. I've had a song with every other episode, and you have to know when to break tendencies. Season 2, when will that drop? Probably 2023. What I'm planning on doing is, depending on how the Patreon situation goes. I'm trying to, hopefully folks will sign up. $3 a month, you get unreleased music and some poems eventually as I get back into poetry writing and some short stories I hope that one day will be published. That'll be $3, and then $5 a month, you get all that. Plus, I'm going to do a monthly podcast called 5 Things. And it'll be from the previous month. Just 5 things that, I don't know, I found significant. And I'm going to try to stay positive. And, some of that will be 5, most of hopefully a lot of those 5 things will be things that I've learned and trying to pass on to you. I think lifelong learning is important, and so that'll be the focus of 5 things. But I'll try to keep it light, as well. I have other venues for politics, poetry, my music. I want to keep this as open and as accessible to as many people as possible. So if I do politics and the 5 things, I'll tread lightly on that. The other thing is, just through this whole process, I realized, having 2 websites really wasn't the thing to do. So, one will go away. So, www.peterokoffer.com will be my only website. So I'm just going to jump in and now focus on some more music, try to get some more music out in 2022. If the 5 things that, if Patreon doesn't jump off, then I will probably just, release 5 things to to the public. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And this the distribution platform I'm going to use for this podcast allows for multiple podcasts. So stay tuned. Sign up on Twitter, sign up on my, and it's there below. Sign up on my Instagram to keep in, to see where I'm at, and occasionally I will post updates on my website. But it's been a good experience. I'm looking forward to season 2 sometime in 2023. I plan to drop that, and thank you for your support, and God bless.